Hello and welcome to the podcast, the VRCade Podcast, a podcast made by arcades for arcades. I am your host, Indie VR, and today my co-hosts we have Mr. Chun. How are you doing, Mr. Chun? Roland, the CEO of VRilliant. How are you today, sir?
Hey, Serge. I'm good, thanks.
Nice. And then we have a guest today, Robert, who is the CEO of CtrlV. How are you today?
What's shaking, fellas? I'm doing awesome. Can't wait to chat. Let's rock and roll.
Brilliant. And Chun?
Well.
Okay,
yeah,
Chun, welcome.
Technical stuff, last minute, last second, whatever.
That's
happens,
all right.
Right?
Yeah, it happens.
Glad to be here.
So let's. Shall we start off with Roland? You just wanted to give a quick update on Rotten Apple.
So we have been hard at work on getting a couple of updates out there that we just want to inform you about. First off, for any of you that are using RVVR, we've just released an update today, and have it confirmed that it's released, which now integrates Rotten Apple with the Game Master functions that you have in RVVR, which I hope makes your Game Master's lives a lot easier. Then second, for anyone using Delusion, we now have a 4D version of Rotten Apple out there, integrated with fans and moving floors. So if you haven't taken a look at that yet, definitely do. That's all the information I actually have for today. So with that, Robert, welcome to the VRCade Podcast. I know that the setup has been pretty chaotic, but here we are. We made it.
Listen, man, it's all good. Like this stuff happens all the time. We're always dealing with technology, as you guys know. So I'm happy to be here.
Thank you very much for coming on. Really appreciate your time.
Rock and roll.
Yes. So let's start with a question. How did you get into VR?
What a wonderful question. Actually, my background comes from the finance industry. So I used to work for a hedge fund, a pretty, in my opinion, pretty successful one. Like it managed, when I left, $22 billion assets under management, some big names. And, you know, the team I worked with, they specifically ingrained into me the difference between a good business and a great business. Now, the entire culture of that company had changed back in 2014. And so I left and I started a company with a friend where we sort of invented and patented a piece of cinema eyewear, very similar to the 3D glasses that you would normally see, but they were bifocal. So you could see different things through each set of lenses, you know, multilingual subtitles, sports games from different angles, etc. And we were pitching it up and down Hollywood, you know, to all the major studios, etc. And then eventually we ran into some troubles with one of our investors on the back end, and they got into some trouble, which sort of got us into trouble, etc. So we had to exit the business and moved it into gaming. But while working through gaming, we kind of said, listen, VR is about to come out, you know, CES January 2016, it's ready to rock and roll. So maybe we should just sort of shelve this idea and take a stab at this VR thing. So we just took the most colossal risk, opened up a virtual reality arcade, which I could tell you for sure it was the first one in North America, and quite possibly the first one in the world of its kind, because some of the ones that had existed over in Asia were a bit of a different type of arcade, almost a completely different business model that we wouldn't even consider them competitors.
Nice.
And this was in 2015, 2016.
2016,
yeah, that's right.
So where did the idea for CtrlV come from? How did that?
Listen, man, we were literally sitting in this place called Tim Hortons, which we have up in Canada. It's a coffee and donut place, and we're like, all right, how do we attack this gaming industry with this, you know, cinema eyewear that we created? And then we were just searching on our phones and we saw the results from CES, and we're like, all right, let's give this a shot, you know. So we reached out to HTC, got some of their hardware. We bought a few computers. We set it up in a living room, blocked out all the sunlight, and just started playing some games. And we're like, this is awesome. You know, do you think people will pay money for this? Like, yeah, I think people will pay money for this. Okay, so should we get like 2 or 4? And we're like, nah. We're going to get 16. We're going to go balls to the wall, and we're going to make this a thing. And so we did.
And which headsets were those that you picked up?
Those were the HTC Vives.
Yeah.
Since then, a lot of our locations have upgraded to the Vive Pro or the Vive Pro 2. You know, I mean, as far as I know, they're the only ones that can be legally used for commercial use. And given our sort of like status, you know, we're a franchise system. We have a lot of people that invested their money to grow a business. We want to make sure we do everything above board. That includes, you know, paying all of our developer partners for the licenses to use their games, etc.
And what about the name? Where did the name come from?
CtrlV, company that really likes virtual reality. No, I'm kidding. Back in the day,
I believed you there for a second.
I would have bought that.
Yeah.
before we kind of got our business heads screwed on properly, we were super nerdy and we wanted to pay some sort of homage to the tech world. And we're like, well, listen, everyone uses a keyboard. What's the most common, you know, keystroke that everyone uses? And so it was Control-V. And at that point, our logo even had like coding syntaxes around it. But we had to alter that going forward.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Like, we like to ask like how the names came across from different companies. That's very the first one I would have bought as well, to be honest. But yeah, that's really cool. What about,
you know, like, I mean, there's always some story about a name. Like, you
Yeah.
go back in history and learn about McDonald's and Nike and all that sort of stuff. But ultimately, like, it doesn't matter the name. You know, a marketer would probably crucify me for this, but the thing is it matters what you deliver and what your business is like. You know, you could have a pretty terrible name and people may still come to you because they love what you give them. And so you build a brand. You know, you don't start with a brand. People don't know Control-V like they know McDonald's. We're still building this brand. And I think a lot of people are, you know, especially in the small startup world, you know, if they're trying to sell their company and they're trying to get an investor and they're like, listen, but we have this brand. And my answer to them is, no, you do not. You have a name that maybe a couple thousand people know. You do not have a brand.
yeah, no,
We ran into something a bit similar, which is when we came up with VRilliant. So the mistake we made, right? I remember it was a sort of sunny day outdoors. We were sitting in the garden, kind of like, what would a cool company name be? And then someone wrote down VRilliant, and we're like, wow, that looks amazing. You know, it's brilliant, but with a V in the front, and it has VR. That's great. And the mistake that we made is never once before opening our first arcade did we ever say the name properly. Which means we had the first customer call us and go like, "Are you the VR place?" And that's what it's been since. So we kept the name, but there's definitely some things that we didn't consider. For example, how easy is it to say?
Yeah,
That's a lesson learned there.
absolutely. It's so important. I mean, it really isn't a marketing podcast, but we can dive down that rabbit hole.
Yeah.
What about,
So,
go on.
Serge, go ahead.
I was just going to ask a general question. What your favorite VR games are? What's your favorite of all time?
Oh my gosh, listen, my team makes fun of me for this so hard, because the first time I ever tried VR was when we bought those initial headsets and set them up in a living room. So I hadn't tried any games. And back then, there was like a handful of them available, right? So when you try something for the first time, that leaves a lasting impression. Whether that game ends up being an awesome game or not, you've got that lasting impression. So the very first game I tried sort of still sits with me, and it's called Jibo Man. And it's by a Future Town. It was an awesome game. You sort of teleport from skyscraper to skyscraper. You got to shoot these droids that come at you. And then right after that, I tried the Brookhaven experiment, which also knocked my socks off. And I was like, this is it. And then as you know, the world went on and all these games started to come around, I became sort of immune to a lot of the flashiness of it. And so I sort of sought out a more unique game. So I became addicted to this one called Kitty Apocalypse, which is a
I've seen that one. Yeah,
You've seen that one?
Yeah.
It's nice to just sit down in silence for a couple hours and just annihilate alien kittens, you know?
Yeah. I did see the trailer of that, and I was like, what is going on here? And then I never tried it, so I might have to try it now.
Yeah, I mean, I like it makes like you may not like it. You know what I'm saying? I'm just saying for me that was sort of my progression between choosing great games. But I mean, when we bring games into Control-V, you know, for our franchisees to use and our owners and all that sort of stuff, they do go through a 26-step vetting process. So just because like there's me here who likes some, unique game that nobody else may have heard of, that doesn't mean it's good for the business, right? We make sure that, there's no bugs, it's polished, there's some replayability that we can come to a reasonable agreement with the game developer in terms of licenses or royalties that we pay them. There's a lot of work that goes into selecting them.
And with for those that don't know, could you just briefly tell us what CtrlV actually does? Because there are a few people that watch that aren't clued up on the whole arcade scene.
Sure. So we sell happiness in the form of virtual reality. Does that sound really bitchy? Like, am I trying to throw a slick sales line?
Where do I sign up?
In all seriousness, like I sort of say that tongue in cheek, but it's kind of real. Like we are brick and mortar virtual reality arcade. So people come in and pay by the hour and they experience VR. Whether they want to do gaming and shoot some zombies, or if they want to do educational things, schools will come in, or homeschool families where people can learn chemistry, astronomy, biology, and virtual reality. We're huge with the autism community because the VR provides a lot of relief for people with autism. Seniors in their 80s, 90s that wouldn't be caught dead wearing a swimsuit are now swimming with whales in the ocean. We've got birthday parties and corporate events, and I think about a month ago we had our second wedding proposal in VR. So these are physical places, right? But the distinction here is that we're not a tech company at all. And I think that's a lot of confusion that maybe the customer base has, or a lot of our other VR arcades in the industry. We're not a VR company. We're not a tech company. We use VR and we use tech as a tool. What we do is we provide an unforgettable experience for the customer, right? So really we do sell happiness in the form of virtual reality. They come out with their minds blown, as I'm sure each one of you had when you first tried VR,
Yeah, definitely. My first experience was a PlayStation Shock Tank Dive. It was, I think, on the PSVR 1. Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, really, really cool. What about so I know you've kind of dipped into it, but what really makes CtrlV unique to other operators?
Well, I think there's two ways to look at this, right? We have the B2C business where, an actual customer will come in and play virtual reality, but we also have the B2B business, for lack of a better word, where we sell this opportunity to somebody else who wants to own their own virtual reality arcade. Not the other businesses that would use it as customers, we consider that B2C, right? So if you're speaking from a B2C standpoint, our stations are typically larger than anyone else's. There's more stations than anyone else's. Our game selection is incredibly huge. There's all these really sort of superficial facets, but ultimately it comes down to the level of service we provide. Our best operator is a woman in her 60s who's a librarian. She can rock the Dewey Decimal System, but sometimes using a cell phone or her email might be difficult. But people come back because of that. We have the return rates that we do. The place has a consistent brand with it. We haven't gone down that path of trying to get all this juxtaposition with different pinball and arcade Pac-Man machines. This is a futuristic sort of VR experience. The whole process that they go through sort of eliminates any apprehensions that they may have. We do, like I said, we do a lot of vetting on our games, so we don't experience any nausea at VR. It's just at CtrlV, it's non-existent because we go through those games. So from a customer standpoint, you come in and you're totally blown away. But from a business standpoint, if somebody's looking to start their own business, start their own virtual reality arcade, be a franchisee, there's a whole myriad here of things. I mean, number one, we have very competitive license costs for our games. Number two, we've built our own internal operating software that helps us reduce the labor costs by 75%. We have appropriate sort of business processes like a triage system, all the tech support, etc., that helps the arcade operate like a well-oiled machine. But I think the most unique thing that we have, and this is by far the most unique within the VR industry, but I'd almost say it's pretty heavily unique within the franchise industry, if you were talking to restaurants or whatever, is is the amount of support we provide our owners. It's not just like, hey, you're going to own a CtrlV. Here's a manual. If you read it, then, you'll be fine. Because that's not how it works. Is people got into business for themselves and not by themselves. So we act as co-CEOs. We have a franchise advisory council where franchisees have a voice to decide the future of the business. We have peer performance groups where they work with each other. We have one-on-one business coaching bi-weekly so they can really speak to someone that can help them grow their business. All of the marketing assets and strategies and playbooks and knowledge bases, it's all there, which you typically don't find with some other businesses, whether they're VR or not.
Yeah, that's pretty unique, I'd say. And
absolutely.
Sorry, Ron.
And I'm just curious. So, I guess if someone's listening to this podcast who's considering starting a VR arcade, what are some of the key things that you've seen that just help with this entire process? What are some of the common mistakes and missteps that you've seen, and what are some things where you'd say, this is probably something that was, when we found out about this was great for us?
Yeah, I think one of the most common missteps amongst VR arcade owners is that they build a business that they think is cool, you know what I mean, and not necessarily what their customer thinks is cool. If you're targeting the super niche nerd gamer type of market, then there's a totally different business that you're going to build than when you're targeting the masses, right? That's what we want to do, is we want to bring VR to the masses. These are average people, 25 to 45-year-old people that are done school, have some disposable income, maybe have a family. It's not your 18 to 25-year-old male gamer with a neck beard that lives in his mother's basement, right? These are I would almost classify them as your average suburbanite. So you need to listen to them. They don't care about having all these colorful, cool lights in their arcade. They don't care about a lot of the hardware and peripherals that come in. They care about having a great experience. I've gone into places where they've gotten all this crazy graffiti all over the wall because it looks trendy, and then they've got a disco ball spinning, and then they've got 7 different colors on keyboards that light up, and it's like sensory overload. And then you come in and you go, what game should I play? And they pull up a list of 10,000 pirated games that they're using, and they're like, well, whichever one you want, you know what I mean? And then they go sit behind the desk while the person is playing and can't figure things out. There's this game that we have. It's one of the first games we've ever had. It's called Space Pirate Trainer.
Yep.
It's like a legend, right? It's been around for ages. And there's this really cool feature in it that when you reach your hand, like you've got 2 guns, and when you reach one of your hands over your back, one of the guns becomes a shield, okay? But this only happens if you have that checked off in the options menu. It's not there by default, right? So this is something that our CtrlV team is aware of. Our operations system has a tips and tricks thing, like how to change your gun into a shield in Space Pirate Trainer. It's got, how to get people easily into a multiplayer game so the staff can deliver incredible service. When somebody hits help out of CtrlV, each light has an IP address. The lights go red. The staff is notified that somebody needs help. They'll come over. We have a sub 5-second response rate, and we track what the reason is for all the help so that we can adjust and make our arcade better. So when somebody has a Space Pirate Trainer issue, we know it, right? That's what we're paid to do. So we had gone to another virtual reality arcade, and we went in there and we opened up Space Pirate Trainer, and we shot, and we're like, let's try to make this a shield, and it didn't happen, right? So we pressed their help button. It took them 9 minutes to get to us. So we sat there for 9 minutes of our hour waiting for somebody to show up. And then that somebody came, and they started jamming our hand further behind our back. They're like, no, that doesn't work. Let's restart the game. No, that doesn't work. Let's restart the computer, And this ate nearly 40 minutes of our time. So it's not about the game. It's not about the tech. It's not about all this. It's about the service that you provide. So when you're starting your own virtual reality arcade, don't think about all these cool things and what you can bring in and omnidirectional treadmills and all this sort of stuff. Think about what the customer actually responds to, what actually has commercial viability to it.
No, I really like that, and I mean, so a couple of things come to mind. One, working with you guys, the back-end information that we have based on sort of help requests that, like being able to see the help requests that you might have received for Rotten Apple, and just compared to the average, that was really, really interesting for us to see. And I think that's you're the only platform where we as developers were actually able to see that. So that's really great. But also the approach that you take to kind of, I guess, customer experience design, but also kind of service excellence of. I think you're the first person I've ever heard talking about sort of time to respond to something not working for a customer and actually measuring it. I don't think many arcades take quite such a strict approach to sort of customer service excellence.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at any of our reviews on Google or Facebook or whatever, people always praise virtual reality itself. You'll see that at any VR business. But our reviews always praise the experience, and when somebody comes in that's apprehensive, I don't know if I can play, I'm missing a leg, or I can't see out of one of my eyes, or I'm afraid to throw up, or, whatever it is, we guide them through that, and it's important because that's what creates a return customer, and a return customer spreads the word of virtual reality, and they bring back other people. And when other people come back, there's a larger adoption of VR because there's less fear of it. And when there's a larger adoption of it, other great things can take place, like its use within, real estate or sales or medicine or whatever it might be. There's got to be a champion that really pushes forward virtual reality on like a larger scale. I think Meta tried to do that, and they had a horrific failure. If you ever went into their space, it was like stick people playing ping pong. And I thought to myself, like, you put in $10 billion into this, and this is what failed. And it's because, again, they didn't think about the customer. They were like, you need to have a Facebook account to use this. All right, well, you've just totally cut out all the people that don't have one or don't want to get one, don't want to use it. Then they were like, we're not going to bring it out into commercial use. The Oculus, they bought up a bunch of games. This is all going to be private, right? And then they sort of stumbled upon the different issues that are preventing in-home adoption. One of the things I very frequently see in AR is that you have all these companies that are trying to outpace each other to see who's, got the BDE there and who's doing better, right? But they're not thinking about the end user. And so I think that's kind of the way that in-home VR went, and it just sort of toppled, at least as of recording of this podcast. Maybe somebody will watch it in a year or two and be like, boy, that guy was wrong.
Yeah, the comment section will be going crazy in about a year.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I'm okay. So, but in that case, you're a bit pessimistic too when it comes to in-home adoption of VR, just because of how sort of the market, but also the product is shaped.
Well, I wouldn't say pessimistic. I would say I'm cautiously optimistic. Because there's major hurdles that whoever's in charge, whether it's the hardware developers or software developers, marketing companies or business strategists, that need to be overcome that aren't being overcome. Like, for example, the necessity for space. Everyone's got like a couch or a house plant or something in the way, to find 10 by 10, which is what we've found to be optimal. That's tough. People are moving into smaller and smaller spaces, and given the state of the economy now, they're probably sharing homes, Then you've got the whole aspect of multiplayer. Everyone wants to play with their friends. Everyone, that's what we get asked number one, So when somebody's going to go out and buy a piece of VR for in-home use, let's say it's like $500, and they'll be like, am I going to risk $500 on this headset and hopefully people will catch on and we'll get this network effect that social media platforms have had? Or am I going to buy the PlayStation, Xbox, PC that I know everyone's already on and just going to jump in and do the online gaming, right? It's like when credit cards got adoption to use in stores. The merchant had to be given free use of this so they could put it in stores so that everyone could come in and use it, right? So they've got to create this network effect, and it's tough. It's one of the strongest economic moats that any business can have, or most difficult to create. So you've got this space issue, you've got this multiplayer issue, you've got, cost, like, this is a bit debatable, right? Like, the cost of VR is going down. I think I just read somewhere that there's going to be a $200 one released, but you have to weigh out you have to weigh out the cost versus what you're getting for it. You know, like when you've got like a tethered headset to like a high-powered 3000 or 4000 series GPU computer, you're getting serious quality there.
Yeah. So, in your arcade, do you get a lot of repeat customers? Would you say that?
And maybe to add to that, what do you think sort of, you mentioned a lot of factors, but what do you like from sort of service quality and also the time to service, but what would you say the main factor is that helped you grow your business with repeat customers?
So we do get a lot of repeat customers. We have a return customer rate of somewhere around 40%, depending on the location. Some of them are hitting around 60%. It is huge, right? Yeah, it's huge to the point where we don't have to put as much effort into marketing to repeat customers because they're coming back on their own. You know, for us, it's to get that new person, the person who's never tried VR, because it's going to change their life. You know what I mean? And I think to answer your question as to what has driven that, I think it's kind of a holistic approach, you know, and it all focuses around that experience. You know, when somebody's booking online, we try to make the UX or the UI of the booking process super easy. You know, we get them all the information that they need ahead of time. When they come in, we've got a training video on the hardware. When they enter VR, we've built our own metaverse in our own sort of system. And you guys still with me here?
Yes.
All right. Well, yeah. Are you still there?
There we are. Yeah, we're
there.
Back.
We go. Where was I talking? I was talking about the experience, right? So
yes,
they'll go through
metaverse.
the training.
You good?
Hello?
Yes, hello.
Hey, Robert.
You guys still with me?
Yeah.
We're here. Hey. Do we have a bit of a delay?
Yeah. Can you hear us at all?
So we can see you fine. We can see you moving around fine. Everything seems to be quite fluid.
Okay, you're back. I think you're back.
Back.
Testing. You there?
You're back?
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm
Okay.
here. Sorry to all the watchers and visitors out there. Apologies. But it's the whole experience, right? Like they'll go through the booking process. They'll get the hardware training. When they go into the VR system that we have our own metaverse that allows them to interact with each other, select games together. It's the help response time. It's our staff knowing that when a group of 4 has come in thinking, oh, these guys are probably going to want to play a 4-person multiplayer game. Let me recommend that to them. When there's a chaotic birthday party and nobody knows what to do, knowing to sort of break them apart into smaller groups because they're easier to manage. You know, when they leave, they get access to a loyalty points program. They've already achieved loyalty points, referral points, and they see recordings of themselves, picture-in-picture VR with the camera that they can now share on social media. So it's the entire end-to-end experience. They're coming in for their lives to be changed. So we got to make sure it happens.
I really like that approach. It's not an easy one for anyone to copy, but the approach to sort of really just engineer the full end-to-end experience is definitely the right way to go.
Yeah, you've got to. I mean, these days, like, it's so easy for somebody to just lease out a place, buy a computer and a VR headset, and say, "Hey, look it, I'm a virtual reality arcade owner." You're a tech owner right now with a lease liability. You know, you got to bring some business into that.
I had to laugh when you mentioned that, right? You visit some arcades where a list of 10,000 pirated games, and it's quite funny for us to see with Rotten Apple that on the one hand, right, we built Rotten Apple for the arcade market. On the other hand, we also released Rotten Apple, an at-home version of it, on Steam. And then occasionally you stumble across these scores in the Steam high scores where you think, okay, so station number 7. That really sounds like someone's playing Rotten Apple through Steam in an arcade instead of through commercially licensing it.
Yeah, and there's there's all these entities that govern piracy in the music industry and the film industry, and they haven't really come over to the VR industry, which is not good for like developers like you, because there's people who are gonna sort of rip you off. Now, if your prerogative is more altruistic and say, let's just play our game, we don't need to make money, then that's fantastic as well if it works for you, you know. But for us, it's all about furthering VR, because it means everyone's success, you know. From a selfish standpoint, it means our success, and it means the success of our franchisees that have invested in us and believe in us, right? But it also means the developer success. You guys have more financing to build better content, you know, more lucrative content, more engaging content, you know. It sort of solidifies the hardware industry. People can see, oh, this is moving forward, you know. We can put more money into this, and this is the danger of being a tech pioneer. Nobody gets you.
Yeah, and I mean, I wouldn't say that we're quite that altruistic. We do have our expenses. We do need to make sure that, you know, our employees, that we're able to pay the salaries for our employees, because without them, basically, we'd have nothing at all.
Right.
On the other hand, right, being quite a small development company, there's also a certain inevitability to, there's like the amount of effort we'd need to put in to be able to have a game that can't be cracked, copied, and sort of sold on some pirate site far outweighs the benefit probably of actually doing that. So stick to the basics, and you accept a certain percentage where it's going to happen.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, some words of encouragement. I wouldn't sell yourself short, right? David beat Goliath, and he was a little guy. So you can
So, Robert, what trends are you seeing at the moment that you're noticing in the VR arcade market as a platform operator?
I think the biggest trends that we're seeing, oh boy, do you mean like from a game standpoint, or from a like a customer standpoint, or just any standpoint, any trend?
Any kind of trends, yeah. I'd like to hear your input.
Well, I mean, one of the biggest trends I'm seeing is a massive sell-off of peripherals. Every time I go online, everyone's trying to get rid of all their peripherals. I think that's probably the biggest trend, because I mean, the thing is with CtrlV is we're so dialed in on what our business is and what we want it to be, you know, that for us it's taking advantage of the trends that work for us and keep moving them forward, you know. I hate to be the kind of person that just sits there and worries about what the competition is doing, you know, a rising tide lifts all ships. I wish them all well, but if I'm obsessed with somebody else's business, I'm not obsessed with mine, and I need to be obsessed with mine in order to grow it, in order to get all these downstream results that I was mentioning earlier, right? But you know, like I said, we opened in 2016. So circa most others came around, you know, late 2016, early 2017, maybe a few in 2018, you know. And at that point, I think a lot of people bought peripherals, and now there's a massive sell-off. Everyone's trying to get rid of them. And I think there's multiple reasons for that. Like, there's the actual peripheral market, which I can dive into if you want, but then there's also the whole post-COVID thing, you know. For a lot of places, like Toronto here in Canada was the most locked down jurisdiction on the planet, consecutive days and cumulative days. We were sitting there blowing money on rent and not bringing in a single dollar of revenue, right? And a lot of our other VR arcades had to experience that as well. And so a lot of owners have blown through their war chest. They've gotten fatigue, you know, okay, everything's lifted now, I gotta rebuild this thing. So some of them are just closing down shop out of fatigue or out of financial troubles as a result of COVID. But I think that's specific to say fatigue or financial troubles. CtrlV right now, 7 years into it, is having its best year in history. Right, all of our locations are doing better than they have ever had. Right, so the aspect of,
that's
huge. The aspects of inflation or COVID influencing your business, those aren't happening. You know, I'd go as far as saying we're a recession-proof business. I don't know if we're a pandemic-proof business. You know, if the government lock our doors, we're going to be locked up. Right?
Having had to repeatedly lock our doors as well, I don't think we.
Yeah, but then, so like these people who bought all these peripherals now are trying to sell them off, right? But then there's the actual peripheral market, you know. we don't bring any peripherals into CtrlV very actively. Like, it's not like we haven't found the right one or anything like that. It's like we do not have this in our arcade because there's a lot of shortcomings with this. You know, somebody will say, "Oh, this is cool. Let's get it. We'll get those haptic feedback gloves, those omnidirectional treadmills, all this sort of stuff." But again, when you're thinking about your customer, you got to think about, first of all, how much space is this going to take up, you know? Because that's important, your revenue per square foot. Secondly, if it breaks, am I on the phone with somebody in Asia that's in a different time zone with a language barrier trying to do the pneumatic engineering fixes myself? Thirdly, how much content is available, you know? Maybe there's only 15 pieces of content available for this peripheral while there's 150 for my other one. So if I have a facility of 16 stations and 16 people come in, I have to say to that person, sorry, you're going to be playing alone because what's available in this station with this peripheral doesn't integrate with everything else and you lose that business, you know? A lot of it
Was there ever any peripheral that you were tempted by? Was there ever anything that came along and you're like, this I would consider?
There's ones that I would consider just out of sheer interest, but I haven't seen any that I would be considered out of a business case, you know? We've got to do what's commercially reasonable. Like, can you imagine like the fury that our franchise owners would feel if I called them and said, each of you need to buy this specific haptic feedback suit. You need to buy every size of it, small, medium, large, extra large. You need to buy 6 different copies so that you can rotate between each session effectively. And then you need to buy a duplicate of that so you can wash it every day. And now you have to increase your labor expense to help everyone get suited up into this at each station. So your staffing's doubling up. Somebody's got to take these home and wash them or dry clean them. And, you know, I'm like, this is going to be $100,000 or $200,000. Like, I just open up another arcade for that, you know, and double my EBITDA margin. So, like, there's got to be commercial responsibility behind this. And as a franchisor, like, we have a fiduciary liability to do what's good for our owners.
And avoid any decisions that come with a huge sort of long tail of activities that...
Yeah. I mean, if you guys haven't noticed, I'm all business, man. You're probably like, let's talk about some tech stuff, you know? Which lenses would you prefer? I'm like, oh, man.
Honestly, I think both sides of it are really important because I think you're going to have a hard time running a successful arcade if you can have the technological part dialed in perfectly. If you're missing the business side of it and sort of business acumen necessary, you're going to have a really hard time.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, from my end, I speak to a lot of arcades and like some of them that are kind of struggling. I try and help them out a bit, and I just tell them honestly to tune into this podcast because we have guests on who talk about the interesting side of things, like what you delved into with everything that you do at CtrlV. I'm sure that it would definitely help out the other smaller kind of VR arcades too. So it's really interesting stuff. What?
Yeah, I mean, yeah go ahead. Sorry, I was just going to keep rambling. You asked me questions.
No.
I was going to say that, like, you know, from what I've read statistically, the average cost for an hour of VR to a customer is about $60, which I think is just ludicrous. I've never seen it myself. I usually see around $40, you know, and somebody will think, you know, okay, $40, you know, I got that in my wallet, I can afford to spend that, etc. But when you're thinking longevity of the virtual reality arcade industry and your business, if you're going to go customer by customer by customer, you're in for a long haul. You got to get one customer who's now going to bring in 3 people, who's going to come with their family 4 and 6 and have those economies of scale and scope. The only way to do that is to make it affordable, right? $40 for one person may not be a lot, but if that one person wants to invite their family of 4 and they're paying $160, this now becomes substantial. So they don't. They go somewhere else, like laser tag or whatever it is. So you have to break down those barriers. But oftentimes, setting that price low is not as easy as you think because you have rent to pay, you have, you know, game licenses to pay, etc. So you have to almost reverse engineer how you structure your business. First, you have to find out what people are willing to pay, and then you find real estate and staffing and things along those lines that fit into that model. If you just pick a location downtown in a mall and say, if you build it, they will come, and you've got this massive rent expense, then you got to put your prices up so high that the benefit becomes diminished. It's asymptotic or logarithmic or whatever the fancy words are.
And I mean, pricing is a massive, massive topic, and getting it dialed in from the start to what your right price point is, I think that's a really tough one. I actually just completely at random had a conversation recently with someone who basically works in pricing advisory. And I didn't know this, but large car manufacturers, I think this is a bit off topic, but large car manufacturers actually, they have these driving experiences where they'd invite people to come and drive these different set of cars. Now, I always thought this was for marketing purposes. Turns out this is for price setting purposes, that throughout this weekend of these people sort of assessing the different aspects of the vehicles, it's how they try to dial in what the right cost is. So it's just huge sort of, I don't know, field of its own to get your pricing right.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the 4 Ps of marketing, or 7 Ps, or 12 Ps, or whatever book you subscribe to. You know what I mean?
What are the
But I mean,
go on, Roland.
I think right for sort of anyone listening, considering an arcade, probably a good place to start is to sort of put together what your costs are for operating a single hour, when it comes to licensing costs, when it comes to having your employees on site, when it comes to the rent that you need covered. Calculate, a couple different scenarios for your pricing, and based on that, you'll then be able to roughly have an idea of which pricing is going to cost you, which
Yep.
is a mistake that we made, that we once had prices that were just too low and we were losing money on every game.
100%.
But also have a very clear idea of where your break even is and how many games you need in any given month to be able to achieve that.
Yeah, that's a great place to start, but I'll give you an even better place to start, and that's reach out to CtrlV, because we've already figured all that out.
End the podcast.
Or that, absolutely, or that.
What are some of the challenges that you faced with CtrlV over the years, and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, so there's a number of like standard business challenges that everyone faces, like setting your price and finding the right location, which games should you bring in, even the moral challenge of should you pirate games and save on some cost or not, right? I think the biggest challenge, and I hate to just beat this to death, but it has been the biggest challenge, has been these COVID lockdowns. It was just like absurd. Our government was classifying us as a water park or a casino. So like these were the last things to reopen. You know what I'm talking about? So like I'm getting these notices. I'm like, what is happening here? How are we a water park or a casino? And they're like, well, we don't have any classification. I'm like, you have one for gun range where people are standing in stalls shooting guns. Do you not think we're more like a gun range? So that was an endless battle, and government support came very late, and now we're dealing with all the inflation as a result of this government support. And I think tomorrow we're expected to see new GDP numbers for Canada, and it's looking like it has slowed, which means, adjusted for inflation, Canada has been stagnant for 5 years. There's been no growth. So knowing about these things and being able to adjust and sort of work forward is important. But I mean, a lot of people don't think that way. Like maybe that's just the way my mind is kind of going, as what's the next steps, how do we build up, etc. from here. But I think as on a more micro level, as a virtual reality arcade owner, the biggest struggle I think is always getting a person in for the first time. Like I said, if they come in at CtrlV, 40% of them are coming back, like within that year, sometimes even within that month, But first of all, like they aren't aware of the brand. Like I said, we're not a McDonald's. They aren't aware of the product. We don't sell burgers that everyone just understands, right? So there's a lot of education that goes into it and a lot of marketing. And, it's really easy to just take a bunch of money and throw it at a marketing company and say, here, buy some Google ads, some Facebook ads, get me businesses. I'm going to be a millionaire. I need a private jet and a hotel room filled with $100 bills and my own course that I'm going to sell on TikTok. But when
that's where you start. You start with the $1 million jet and
Yes.
build from there.
Exactly. But what actually works is to show people that you are a local business owner. I'm not going down to CtrlV. I'm going down to Robert's virtual reality arcade. I know Robert. He comes out to the local blues and jazz festival and sets up a VR booth. He's going to network with the Chamber of Commerce and go to all these events. He carries around with him a stack of gift cards in his car that he gives away for free. If somebody was a great server at a restaurant, you build that reputation as a business owner, and that's what gets people coming in, right? So in order to be successful at any business, I should say, not just VR, is you've got to have that outgoing charisma, that hustle, that grind to get out there and do things. And there's some things that you can't help. If you look really weird and people are afraid to talk to you, you can't really get over that. You need to find somebody who's going to do this for you. But that aspect of the growth of the business is so important.
So I'm curious, on any given week, Robert, how many hours would you say you spend working on or for CtrlV in any way, shape, or form? Where do you think you'd clock in?
Well, I probably the standard 9 to 5 for me is filled with phone calls and video calls and calls with franchisees and brokers and all that sort of stuff. People looking to buy a location. So I am living on the phone all day. Then basically I will eat dinner, and after that I probably put in another 5 to 10 hours depending on the evening doing more stuff. For CtrlV. This is where I get to all the tangible work that I need to do, Excel spreadsheets or PowerPoint decks, or responding to emails, or taking care of tasks, revamping payment gateways, etc. So it's almost an all-day thing, right? But that doesn't preclude me from doing other things. Like I was telling you earlier, I own a music production company that puts on concerts 3 or 4 times a week. I'm a competitive pool player. In 2018 I went to Las Vegas to compete against the US and Japan because we won the champ. There was 700 teams here. We placed 125th. I'm a 3-time world poutine eating champion, which is the national I'm not kidding. I kickbox. I kickbox twice a week. Like this isn't boxercise or Taebo. This is proper learning to brawl. I lane swim 3 times a week. I'm an avid musician. I play the guitar. I play the drums. I teach bass. So there's enough time for everyone to do things. It just depends on where you prioritize it. I don't have a family, right? So I don't have that priority. Some people may choose to
or
prioritize
sleep.
one thing
It
or
seems.
the other. You know what? I get in sleep, man. Like I said, everyone's got the same amount of time. I'll probably put in about 7 hours a night of sleep, roughly. But I'm going, right? I'm going. My next call is going to be on. I'm going to jump on the next call while I'm driving. I'm trying to solve things in my head, so when I get to my computer, I'm not just looking at a spreadsheet saying, what equal or if or and statement do I need to put here? I've thought about it so I could just get things moving. You have to have that discipline to just keep going forward and not just get bogged down.
I'd even go on further, and I think you alluded to this a bit earlier, which is sort of there's an obsessive component to it. It is important and probably even good to be obsessive about the business that you're trying to operate, because you're going to be down in the details and you're going to be thinking through everything, and this is in your off time, in your on time, throughout the entire day.
Yeah, if you're just a task monkey, then you're just an employee, right? Which is fine. There's people there that have to be employees, right? That's what they want. They'd rather the 9 to 5 and then go home and do whatever it is. But if you've made the decision to be an entrepreneur, you can't just be a task monkey, just somebody who checks things off. I look at it this way, that a CEO has 3 main jobs, right? Now, a lot of things fall into these because they're fairly vague, but one is to make sure that you're increasing wealth for the stakeholders, so your franchise owners, your shareholders, etc. 2 is that you're planning the vision for where the company has to go next, whether it's in upgrades or whatever it might be. And 3 is to maintain a company culture. You've got to be the leader that does that. you know. And I think one of the most important cultures within any business is that grit, that moxie, you know.
Yep.
Very inspiring indeed.
I'm available for bookings.
Yes. Speaking of calls, I know you do need to go very shortly. So I guess let's just do one really quick question. And what can you share about the future, the next steps of CtrlV?
Yeah, I mean, that one's easy. Global domination.
Excellent. Thank you for joining.
Yeah, you're welcome. Good night, everyone. I'll be outside. No, I'm sort of, again, a little bit of a tongue in cheek here, right? Like, we've built something that works. We've proven it out for it to work. We've proven it out over 7 years. It works, right? Now is our opportunity to grow it. Specifically, give other people the opportunity that have always wanted to be entrepreneurs, that maybe don't know that idea. You know, should I open up a donut shop, or should I do some fulfilled by Amazon thing on the internet or whatever, right? We're giving you a package with all the support systems for you to become an entrepreneur, do something cool. You don't go home smelling like burgers and fries, and you have some satisfaction in the excitement that people come back with, right? So for us, it's finding more franchise partners. That's the next step. Expansion across Canada and the United States, where we're predominantly dominated. And if there is an opportunity for a rock star to move us into other places, like whether it's the Middle East or Australia or whatever it might be, then we'll do that as well.
Awesome stuff. Thank you very much for coming on, Robert. It's been great, very insightful, inspiring. It's been funny. It's been great.
Cool. I had a good time.
Yeah. Do you, Roland and Chan, do you have any last quick questions, or? No, you're all good.
My
Okay.
mind is still stuck on that pudding eating champion thing, so I
Okay.
think clearly. So.
Robert, do you want to quickly share where people can find you, your Instagrams and things like that?
Sure. I mean, if you go on to www.virtualrealityfranchise.com, you'll find our entire corporate page of all of CtrlV. If you want to book a spot, you just go to CtrlVRCade.com, and you'll see all the Instagrams and connections to TikTok and Facebook and everything on there.
Awesome stuff. Great. Okay, well, thank you everyone for tuning in and watching. It's been a great episode. We really appreciate you being here. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in 2 weeks' time. Thank you very much,
Thanks,
guys.
fellas.
Cheers.
Everyone.
See ya.
Bye-bye.
Bye.